Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Opinion Machine, the show where we talk about all things gaming. My name is Killjoy, and today I want to talk about remasters, remakes, and reimaginings. And this is something I've may have done in the past. I honestly can't remember, but it's something that I have wanted to talk about for a while. And my takes on these terms, as well as my sort of frustrations with the gaming industry, the way they kind of chop them around. So we're going to start with remasters, remakes, and reimagining. And I've got some examples of what I consider games to fit all of these categories. Now, off the bat, look, these terms are very loosely used, and certain games that are remasters can be considered remakes. It's kind of depending on what your definition is. Same with reimaginings, stuff like that. But I want to give sort of what I consider to be the important parts of these different games, and kind of like what I consider, like, you know, is this a reimagining, is this a remake, or is it many of these things, that all that good stuff. So let's start off with the term that we hear the most these days, is the remaster. So what is a remaster? What is remastering? So I come from the audio world, a lot of music, and when you remaster audio, that is you going back in with the audio and cleaning it up and making it a nicer experience and adding quality to it, and just to make something sound brighter and more listenable, shall we say. I mean, like, you see a lot of albums get like a 10-year anniversary and it's like remastered audio quality, and what that basically means is it just sounds cleaner, crisper, it's just nicer on the ears. It's a very basic way of explaining it, but that's kind of what's happening behind the scenes, and we kind of see this with video games as well. Now, these never used to be called remasters, they used to be called HDs. So, for example, if you want a very simple example of this, then Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker HD, or HD port. That was what the term was used for the longest time. Right? It was just, here's an HD port with some tweaks. And then we got into remasters. I don't know what the first game that used that was, but I know the term's probably been around for a while. But remasters, what are they? What is my definition of a remaster? Okay, so when I hear a company say, hey, we're remastering X game, what that usually means, in my head instantly, I'm like, right, so you're upscaling it for, you know, bigger resolutions, probably in 4K as well. Okay, cool, that's fine. Hopefully you're adding quality of life, because to me that's like the big thing. Stuff with the controls, audio, graphics. More than likely going to contain all the DLC if there were DLC from that game. And the big reason for it is like, hey, this game came out on, say, the PS2 or the PS3, and we want it to run on modern systems like the PS5. So we're going to remaster it, make it look a little bit sharper, and add some quality of life. Maybe controls have moved on since then, so we're going to update the controls and release it, you know, and hopefully charge slightly less for it. But if it's a complete package, you know, like 40 quid, reasonable. Now, remasters that come in all shapes and sizes, and remasters very much vary in quality. I have two examples of remasters here that I consider remasters, that I think are how a remaster should be done. First one is Command & Conquer Remastered Collection. So that's the original Command & Conquer, and that's Red Alert. What did they do? Well, first off, they redid all the sprite drawings so that they were in 4K. So you can press spacebar between playing the game to have the original graphics or the new updated graphics. It looks super clean. There's no pixeling. Everything looks really, really nice. On top of that, they went back and added all of the campaigns from all the expansions and all the console exclusive stuff, so you have all the missions, right? On top of that, they added quality of life. They allowed you to have customizable controls. They let you have left click or right click depending on what kind of RTS you're used to playing. They added enhanced. They went back and remastered the audio. They added in some music, new music from Frank Klepacki and the Tiberian Suns that they added to the game. They went back and used an AI to go and do all of the movies to make them look in better quality. They added a ton of bonus features, right? Regardless of how you feel about the gameplay, right? The gameplay, like, I really like Red Alert, Command & Conquer Remaster Collection, but if you don't like it, when I take a step back and go, actually, these guys added a lot to this package. You're getting 2 games, a ton of campaigns, a ton of bonus missions, difficulty settings, just updated movies, updated audio, like tons of things, right? And to me, that was a package. I think that came out at like £25 to £30. To me, that was what I would consider like a really solid remaster. Another good example of this, one that I haven't actually played but I've seen a lot of, is Mass Effect Legendary Edition. That's 3 games that are considered or very well loved games that got put into a collection with updated visuals and controls. Apparently, the first game plays much better now, looks better, looks much more like the second and the third game, has better controls, all this quality of life stuff, and like these are just two examples of really, really good ways of remastering a game, you know, and also selling that at a reasonable price. Mass Effect Legendary Edition was like £50, which is fair enough. These are 3 very big RPGs. Putting that in a collection and then making the first game run incredibly well, like updating the controls, updating how the game plays, updating UI elements, all this sort of stuff. Like UI is another thing I failed to mention. Updating the UI is super important in a remaster. But those are just really good examples. Like, so we hear the term remaster get thrown around a lot. Hello, Puss. And obviously, you know, you expect there's a certain level, or for what I expect, there's a certain level of better resolution, quality of life. Those are the 2 main things, and then probably all the DLC thrown in together. And you want it to run well, no matter what it's on. On top of that, you then have examples of like what Blizzard do. Now, I'm not going to spend this entire time bashing on Blizzard, right? But for me personally, I don't think Blizzard gets it when they do remasters, right? Their remasters, I mean, Warcraft was a big failure on launch, right? Let's forget about that. Let's look at the ones that people actually liked. StarCraft remastered, and you take a no for an answer today, sweetheart. And Diablo 2 Resurrected, right? Now, I don't like these as remasters because I don't think they go far enough to justify the price. Plus, the original games still work. So what do? So StarCraft Remastered has the same ability where you can tap the space bar and it'll change from old graphics to new graphics. Looks lovely. Works on wider monitors. Updated resolution. But because this game was primarily aimed at a specific audience, being the pro scene, they didn't add a lot of features in. There are some things that are nice, but there's no controls they haven't updated, like maybe the AI and stuff. And they were never going to do that. This game was basically like, let's make it look nicer, make it run on modern systems, allow the pros and people to, you don't want to take no for an answer, do you? To just basically do all these things. And so when I looked at it, I was like, well, I have no reason to buy this. This is not for me. This is not the sort of thing that I expect from a remaster. I expect more quality of life, and it wasn't there. Diablo 2 as well, same problem for me personally. It was like, yes, the new visuals look lovely and you can switch between them, and they added in a few other bits, but it felt like primarily they were just like, here's the game, here's the better visuals, you know, and there's like, it runs on, you can connect to each other. And you could say, okay, well, maybe there isn't things that need to be quality of life stuff in those games. I'm sure there is. I'm pretty sure there's probably things you could go back and tweak just to be a bit more modern that wouldn't break the games and all that. But for me personally, those games don't do enough for me to justify buying them, right? Whereas Command & Conquer Remastered and Mass Effect, both games that give you a ton of content and a lot of things. So that's kind of how I see remasters. Like Commandos 2 HD, terrible remaster. Not a great one. Maybe it's better now, but there's a bunch of games that came out that just, they have this remaster attached to it, they have the HD thing attached to it, and they're just not living up to what I would consider to be a good remaster. You're gonna have to move, sweetie. Sorry. Ow, my leg. Now it comes on to the remake. Now remakes are what I can kind of consider all of the above, but that's kind of like the game's being brought into a modern time. It should have modern sensibilities. It should have modern controls. You know, it should look nice. It should run on these systems. But basically, the way I see a remake is you can't, most of the time, is built from the ground up in a new engine, new visuals. You know, taking the original game and just making it better. So the two that come to mind, you know, these are both Nintendo games, but these are the two that two of them that I bring up. So we've got Advance Wars Reboot Camp, so 1 and 2 Reboot Camp, which are the original Advance Wars games on the Game Boy Advance. They have not been re-released in anything, you know, been on the Wii U and stuff, like they've been on, as ports, we shall say. But these games are getting they're built on a brand new engine, brand new graphics. There's quality of life improvements in them. There's brand new music. There's new sound fonts, we'll call them. Basically, obviously the sound chip in the Game Boy Advance is not the same that's in the Switch. You know, we're getting 2 games in one, and it's basically like, hey, we're not just taking those games, making the pixel art look nicer and just releasing them. We are building these brand new engine or brand new graphics in this brand new engine to bring these games and bring them back And they basically like are one-for-one remakes for the most part. That's not completely true, but you can generalize and say, yeah, this is basically a one-for-one. You're not changing the gameplay drastically. That's more of a reimagining. We'll get onto that. And yeah, so we're getting Advanced Wars Reboot Camp that has all this stuff. So 2 games, all of the content from those games, quality of life, brand new engine, works on modern system, allowing people that can play those games, but it's hard to play those games. Here you go, hear it. The other examples of this are the Metroid games. Metroid Samus Returns, you could say is possibly a reimagining. This is where the lines blur, but it's a remake of Samus 2 and also Metroid Zero Mission, which is a remake of the original Metroid. These games to me are great examples of remakes. They take what was there, they update the visuals and brand new like pixel art, or in Samus Returns case, brand new 3D game from what was originally pixel art on the Game Boy, and you just rebuild those games and you add in the elements, again, quality of life, modern sensibilities, all of that stuff for a good remake. And you improve upon the originals. If you're going to remake a game, you want to improve on the places that it failed. So in Samus Returns case, the ability to stop and aim seems like such a small thing, but it works. And so for me personally, a remake is taking a game, rebuilding it, re-releasing. Crash Insane Trilogy is a weird one, because technically it's a remake and a remaster, because they built the graphics and stuff on that, on the original sort of framework, but obviously they've added stuff to it, modern sensibilities, so you could say that's a remake as well. Same with the Spyro Trilogy. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 is a weird one as well, because it's technically a remaster / remake, so the lines do get a bit blurred, but generally remake is rebuilding the game, new engine, plays it with modern sensibilities, hopefully runs, if the original game ran like ass, hopefully runs at a stable 60 frames now, all of that stuff, and just to be clear, remaster, I don't expect brand new visuals. I expect updated visuals. Whereas a remake, I expect the game to look very different. Use a new engine. If it looked in 2D in one, now in 3D, or maybe the visuals were PS1 era to like PS5 era. They're like smoothed out. They're not blocky. That kind of thing. And there are tons of remakes. There are tons of good remakes out there that exist. And then that brings me on to reimagining. So this is not something that you hear massively often, but I think the most obvious example, and this is going to get a bit confusing, the most obvious example of a reimagining in recent times is Final Fantasy VII Remake. So, the original Final Fantasy VII is that polygonal look from the PS1, it's top-down, very static-looking screens. Remake, which is a reimagining, is completely different, completely new combat system. The story might mostly be the same, right? But and you're hitting the same story beats, but you're in a massive 3D environment now. The combat is completely different. There are elements of that original game, but this is completely overhauled. If they'd one-for-one remaked it, it would still have had that kind of top-down look. It still had that turn-based system. It would have been updated as a remake, but this is, even though it's called a remake, it is a reimagining. There is so much different. It's night and day compared to the original, really, the games. So that's kind of one example of how very different it can be. GoldenEye 007, which is a reimagining of GoldenEye from the N64. Now, while the core gunplay is, gunplay, it's not exactly the same. GoldenEye 007, when it was released on the Wii, has elements of that original game, but the levels are very different. You play as Daniel Craig's James Bond. There are different parts to it. The gunplay is much more like Call of Duty. And they took the game. It's not just a remake. I mean, technically they are remakes, but reimagining goes that one step further and changes things up drastically. If you had a one-for-one remake or the original GoldenEye remade now, beat for beat, you could do that. And it kind of happened. There's apparently a version of it out there in limbo. But this is a reimagining. This is what do we do if this GoldenEye was made now with Daniel Craig. The levels are different. The guns are different. There are more things to it. There's all of these elements that have changed. So you're there's a nostalgia there for parts of it, but actually these levels, they're different. They might have, the parts of the level might be the same. Dam starts off the same, but becomes very different. Statue, again, very different. There's a nightclub in the remake, in the reimagining, which wasn't in the original. And what I expect from a reimagining is everything I expect from a remake, which is everything I expect from a remaster. This is just redoing the game in a very different way. You could also use the term reboot, but I'm not even going to go down that road. That's something completely different. But these examples that I'm giving are what I consider to be in these categories. Final Fantasy VII Remake, GoldenEye 007. They are reimagining what the original game was like. I see a remake as, hey, we're taking that game that you love, we're putting it in a brand new engine, we're adding all this new stuff, or, you know, making it play with modern sensibilities, and maybe redoing the soundtrack, maybe you can have both. But it's built in a new engine. It's not just taking that game, it's not just taking that original Advance Wars and putting it on the Switch still. No, we're rebuilding that game in a new engine, so it still plays how you imagine it, but it looks nicer, it looks different, it's updated with all this stuff in it. And then the remaster is, hey, we're upscaling it. We've added some quality of life. We've done a complete package. We've added all the DLC. And that's kind of how I see these things. Like, if a game says it's been remastered, I expect quality of life to be the thing for me, personally. If I see a game being remade, I'm like, okay, you're putting in a brand new engine. You're redoing these assets. You're actually spending time to take this game. Maybe you do some quirky changes, but generally speaking, it's the same game that you've played. It's just, oh my god, it plays with modern controls. It's like smoother, it runs better, that sort of stuff. A good example of a remake would be Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes. You could say maybe a reimagining, but that's only because the cutscenes are a bit different. That is a really good remake of the original, with added modernized controls, parts of stuff that was added in Metal Gear Solid 2. Another great example of a remake. I'm kind of just doing this video because I kind of wanted to rant about it, because I'm sick of seeing like these lines being blurred between remakes, remasters, reimagining. This is what I think of when I think of those terms. So hopefully that clarifies stuff for you guys. If anyone out there is interested, that's what I see it as. Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition's a weird one. That's kind of a remaster. Like, you could say that's a remake, but I see that as more of a remaster itself, because it's mostly quality of life. Yes, they did go back and use Xenoblade Chronicles 2's engine, but primarily I'd see that as a remaster. It's one of those ones that skirts the line between remaster and remake. But anyway, guys, thank you very much for watching, as always. If you like the video, hit like. If you want to see more content like this, then hit subscribe. Links for Facebook and Twitter will be down below in the description, as always. And until next video, I will see you then.